Melissa, thank you so much for joining me again. It's great to see you as always. How are things in your world?
They are good. They are good over here in Australia. I'm sure it's wild everywhere, but good, exciting. Feels like it's like a good shakeup. I don't know, are you feeling that?
Yeah, I am. I am definitely. I mean, we've got so many things to look at when you turn on the television and be worried about, concerned about, apprehensive, especially with young children. You look towards the future and think, what the hell's the world going to look like in another decade? But equally, like you say there's so many people starting to question things like never before, looking into alternative things like never before. And I think that's, like you say, a shake-up is almost a great way to describe it, because sometimes when people are comfortable, they sort of stay in their comfort zone. Yet when things kind of force you to look outside of that, you can find a lot of things you wouldn't have done had you not been forced to look for them. So I see it. I'm trying to find the positive in the madness, like you.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. It does seem like so many more people are switching on in that way. Like I'll be watching the kids at jujitsu and strike up a convo with the person next to us, and then they're, popping out these comments like really sort of rebellious. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like my people are everywhere. So it really
Yeah.
seems that way.
Yeah, what it feels, and I think health is a really key area for it, because I think what there used to be is there was like extremes on both sides, where there was the people that bought everything, there was the people that were really anti-system, and there was the vast majority of people in the middle that kind of didn't care, but it didn't necessarily affect them enough for them to take a side. It didn't affect them enough for them to maybe change their lives in certain ways. Yeah, I feel that demographic in the middle now, more and more people are starting to shift towards the, okay, I'm going to have to find some alternatives here, because whatever it is I'm being told to do is not working for me. And I think in the health space, I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia, but here we've seen a massive rollout of these weight loss vaccines. I don't know if you guys have the
Mm,
same, where you
mm,
see a lot of people going that side, and then you see the other extreme where people are going, right, I'm going to have to take control of my health because the mainstream health system ain't going to do it for me. So I need to
mm,
look after what I'm eating a little bit more, move better, look at alternative medicines and more natural ways of doing it. And that middle group, I think, has got a lot smaller. People are
mm.
kind of starting to polarize, which is not always a good thing. But I think with this, it is, because people are starting to turn their back on the mainstream system. Are you seeing that as well?
And it's like, that sort of tapestry. And for a lot of people, the health, sort of lies around what people should be doing. Definitely a lot of these injections, everything. When they pull at that one thread where they realize, wait a minute, we've been fully lied to about certain things. And then what else are they lying to us about if that's true for health? And so it's definitely that gateway, I think, for a lot of people to switch on. And I think in the mainstream, like when it comes to medicine at the moment, they are just shooting themselves in the foot with, yeah, all of the weight loss injections, with these new cancer cure vaccinations they're touting, like all of these really intense, and they're flogging just more and more vaccines every year. And we're just at the end of that real pharmaceutical era where people look at antibiotics and think, wow, yes, this like life-saving, intervention, and same with steroids. And so when people realize then, do you know what? I'm really not happy with that system of medicine for my family anymore. What other options then do I have? And that's when they start looking and, yeah, finding a lot of that information that's been, a bit more suppressed around how to look after themselves. But our generation, I think, is working a lot harder. And like people these days, compared to like maybe one or two before, people could sort of get away with like eating like quite a lot of crap. They did a lot of pharmaceuticals here and there, but it's really showing up like for us and for our kids. And so you're seeing this whole wave of people who are just really demanding more, in the food space. Like, why do we have to pay so much more money here for like poison free food? Like, it's sort of really becoming obvious to people that something's seriously wrong. I think with the way we approach, humanity in general, really, but health definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I think also mainstream medicine is kind of running out of answers for people.
Mm,
It's here's this pill, or here's this, do this for the rest of your life. There's no solution.
mm,
Whereas, the type of work you do and the type of work other people do in the alternative space is very much right. Here's the solution. This is not something that you're expected to do for the rest of your life, and you're going to have, certain drugs that will have certain side effects, and you'll need more drugs to counteract those side effects. So I think a lot of people now are turning around going, well, I don't like what they're selling, so what else is out there? And
Mm,
a lot of the alternative, whether it's preventative stuff like what you're putting into your body, or reactionary stuff like homeopathy and so on, you are taking control yourself. You're kind of in the driving seat. You're not looking at somebody in a white coat who's telling you that this is what you need to do with your life. You're very much
mm,
taking control of it yourself, and you're figuring out your own journey. And I think that sense of empowerment is something that a lot of people probably used to shy away from. They used to think, somebody just tell me what to do and I'll follow them, and then it's their fault if it goes wrong. Whereas I feel like now a lot more people are going, actually, you know what? Like you said there, I've been lied to by you before. So I'm going to work on the assumption you're going to lie to me again. So I'm
mm,
just going to take control of this for myself. And I think that's really, really exciting, really
mm.
exciting. And you must be seeing that with homeopathy, which always was considered, I guess, to a lot of people, probably I'm going to go to my doctor first, and if they can't help me, then I'm going to go here. But I imagine a lot of people are coming to you and homeopathy in general as a first point of call now, and they're just ignoring the doctor completely. Are you finding that?
Yeah, we definitely attract more and more people, like families, where they were brought up on homeopathy. They've never used anything but. And so their health really reflects that. You see them when they're adults and they were raised on homeopathy. And back then, there were some people who found it earlier. I don't know how old you would have been when your family started using it. I remember seeing something your dad was speaking about. Oh, I feel like this was like 8 years ago, and he was talking about some healer on the Isle of Wight who was using homeopathy. He was talking about frequency in medicine. I'm like, cool, all right. It's so that energy medicine is
Yeah.
really like coming up. Whereas now I feel like, with all the red light and with people talking about circadian rhythm and our water and really like the electrical aspect of human beings and like our field and depending on where people's beliefs extend, even sort of this holographic universe, really, and people are realizing that vibration underpins it all. What you create in your life, what you manifest, as well as your health, whether you have irritable bowel syndrome or something, it can be vibrational at the core. So, yeah, the advancement of homeopathy and people just seeking to use frequency to heal themselves is hugely, gaining traction.
So what was your background then that got you into
Mm,
homeopathy? Just to go back to the start, because it's a very ancient discipline, isn't it? People think about modern
yeah.
medicine and then don't really conclude actually modern medicine means modern. It's not been around very long, but things like homeopathy and herbalism and things like that have been around for centuries. There was, I believe, hundreds of homeopathic hospitals in America at one point.
Mm.
So how did your journey into that begin?
Yeah, so my sister had recurrent urinary tract infections. So she would be hospitalized pretty much every month or every other month. And what was interesting is that she would only go to hospital if she had had sex. So if she had sex, she would get this really severe infection, and then she'd be on an oxygen mask, IV antibiotics, in hospital for a week. And it was this huge, big emotional roller coaster. So my dad is a medical doctor. He does all of the best treatments, that medicine has. And she's got the best specialists in the hospital. So she's in and out of hospital like every other month for 6 years, pretty much. And I was studying to be a naturopath at the time. So, really looking more that herbs and supplements kind of route. And we tried everything. We did traditional Chinese medicine. She quit her job. She was grounding. She was doing like all of the wholesome things you can think of. And it was not budging it. And pretty much the doctors at the end of that, they said to her, look, you need to be on prophylactic antibiotics every day for the rest of your life, and you can't have sex because it's too dangerous for you. And so she's 21 being told that. And, then you go through all the things. Oh my gosh, I'll never have a family. I won't, settle down. And so when she got told that, and I was there with her in the hospital, I used to have this lecturer at college. His name was Peter, and he was a naturopath, but he was also a homeopath. And so he used to say to me, you'd love homeopathy, you should look into homeopathy. And I used to fob him off because I'd never heard of homeopathy. So in Australia, really, 10 years ago, wasn't that well known. And so he said it to me one day when she was in hospital, and I was like, right, that's it. If you can cure my sister's chronic condition, I will change my degree into homeopathy. And so he's like, right, when can she meet with me? So we met in a cafe, and he's just asking her for like an hour, 90 minutes. He's saying, tell me everything about your health and your history. And he's like, tell me about your mental emotional state. Tell me about what it was like growing up, tell me about your sibling dynamics. How do you get on with your parents? What was it like? And he's asking all these weird questions like, what position do you sleep in? What foods do you crave? And then, of course, he wanted to know everything about her physical conditions over the years. So he wanted to know, were you the kid who always got tonsillitis? Were you the kid who had stomach issues or respiratory issues? Now, some people have like a known sort of affinity and a susceptibility in a certain area. So some kids, every time they get sick, it's always chesty. Some kids, it's always like sinusy. Some, it's the gut. Um, and that really just shows our unique energetic footprint, that every human being, before we manifest the matter, we're actually sort of like this energetic blueprint. And if you want to change the physical matter, so in my sister's case, it's this genitourinary like flare up in response to having sex. And it's like, why is this loop going on? And what the homeopath ended up finding is that she had a lot of suppressed emotions that she needed to get up and out so that then she wouldn't have this physical condition going on anymore. And so he gave her this remedy called Staphysagria, and she would take 2 drops under the tongue morning and night. And what happened was almost immediate. She started to have all of these physical changes going on. But it was the resentment, and the bitterness that she started to like really feel that was purging up. And then her body didn't react like that again. So it completely broke this cycle of the pattern that she was in. And so I was totally just sort of shocked by what I'd seen, with my sister. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you think, is this a placebo? You think, how could this possibly happen that from this medicine, drops under the tongue, that it would trigger this huge physical, mental, and emotional response? But what you find in homeopathy is that all of it is linked. Our mental health, our emotions, our fears, our phobias, whatever it is that we're going through, is not actually separate from the tonsillitis, the gut issues, the skin, all of that. So, yeah, that's really what led me into homeopathy. And then since I found it, from my sister, it's just been a phenomenal unfolding. And, the amount of illnesses that we're told, there's just no cure for this. I would have a case probably on every condition that a doctor would tell you it's not possible, where we can show exactly what's possible. And it's because the capacity of a human body to heal is huge, but it needs sometimes that right stimulus. Our bodies energetically get off track. And what you find with homeopathy too is that a lot of us have inherited that energetic blueprint down our family lines. And so in the mainstream, they might say it's your genetics, right? You're just susceptible, you just inherited it. But the homeopath knows that it's the energetics that you inherited and that that can be changed. So that's really been the process in defining homeopathy.
Well, to start with, the story about the cafe and him sitting down and asking your sister all these questions. A doctor doesn't even do that, do they? They say,
Mm.
"What are your symptoms?" Right. I'll type into my computer those symptoms, and it will give me a prescription to give you, and then I'll send you on your way. You're in there for 5-10 minutes max, and
Yeah.
you're right. All of those things that contribute to your health. With you can be eating all the right stuff. You can be exercising every day, but if you're in a toxic marriage, or you're in a job that stresses you to the point, or you've got financial issues or something that's causing you extreme stress, you're obviously not going to be healthy, and they're not going to
Mm.
necessarily pick that up without asking all of those questions. And it's always been one of my biggest frustrations is that we don't have, say, an annual or biannual sit down with your physician who talks to you about your life, finds out what's going on in your
Mm.
life. How are you feeling at home? How's your job? What have you been eating? All of those things, and then making a plan together to stop you getting sick rather than reacting when you do get sick, which is all mainstream medicine seems to do. But in terms of the frequency side, which I think is fascinating, because so many of the alternative health disciplines, which are really becoming very prominent now, are all based on energy and energy alignment,
Mm.
whether that is things like the Tesla machines, the energy harmonizing machines, whether it be homeopathy, whether it be herbalism, all of those different disciplines and others that I've not mentioned. Do you think that's something that we're seeing move more and more in that direction? Because the evidence has got to the point now where the mainstream can try and dismiss it. They can try and say it's quackery and it's conspiracy theories and it's pseudoscience and all of that. But it's becoming so overwhelming, the evidence, that there is something here. And for that story you've told us about your sister, there's probably another 1,000, 2,000 stories very similar that people can tell of how these types of things have helped people who were basically told there's nothing we can do for you by their mainstream doctors.
Absolutely. And so I think it starts with, like you're saying, the medical doctors. You go in, and a lot of people are having not good results. They're not being heard, and all of that. Um, but then another issue is sort of even our functional medicine, which has become a bit of a green pharmacy in and of itself, with, even like the immense biohacking, where it's sort of like still overriding the divine intelligence of the body. So the thing that I love about homeopathy, or like any of the frequency stimulations, is that your body does know how to heal itself. And so when we're taking like heaps of herbs or heaps of supplements, we're essentially still trying to force the body into submission, right? If you're taking all of these herbs that are specifically to release certain chemicals in the brain, it's like you're still chemically forcing it. Whereas when you use frequency only, you stimulate the field, but you allow the body to set up its own perfect levels. And so when we are healing, whether it's eczema, asthma, hay fever, allergies, fertility issues in women, like hormonal things, huge things, we have people who, there's a medical doctor, Roger Morrison, and he came to study homeopathy because he was an emergency room physician. And this woman with MS, who used to be one of his private patients as a doctor, she just like walked into the emergency room, like looking after someone else. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? And how are you walking?" And she said, "I've been doing this treatment. It's called homeopathy. I'm in full blown, like, complete remission." And so it's this frequency medicine that she's taken under the tongue. And then, we purge out a lot of the emotional things, a lot of the toxicity that was contributing to these symptoms, that disease process, and we get it out. And that's the thing with symptoms. They are all just little clues for the individual about where your energy has uniquely gotten off track. Because you could have 20 people come to see you in homeopathic practice and say they've all got irritable bowel syndrome, like mad, cramping, dodgy guts, think they're allergic to different foods. Heaps of people struggle with issues these days with their gut, but each of them might need a distinctly different energetic frequency to actually trigger their healing response. And that depends on what was the cause, like what was going on around the time that these symptoms started. And when you ask people, some will say, my dad died actually like 2 years before this full blown IBS started. And so when you give them that very unique frequency, you give them something that deals with unexpressed grief, and fear, and anxiety that came on post that life event. And then they take that remedy, they start purging all the physical things, but then purging the emotional things, and then the physical complaints get better. And what you said is right, Jaymie. Like, no doctor is able to piece together the clues, and the symptoms to be like one conducive, like big picture image, because they're too busy plucking off all of the parts. They say, "Oh, you've
Yeah.
got psoriasis. Let me give you steroids for that. And, you've got cold sores. Let me give you antivirals for that." But they don't see the underpinning frequency that's really showing you exactly what they need to bring that body back into balance and that mind back into balance. So they really have like no chance. And in Australia, it's actually 7 minutes is the average consult
Wow.
with an MD. And that's from also, I think, the time that they actually write your prescription. So from walking in, it's like you can't gather anything with that. So
No.
the dream would be in the future for the world that we're creating, right? That everybody would almost get like we call it bulk billing in Australia, where it's sort of like everyone gets that for free, say like a checkup to keep you well, because we know that we would
Mhm.
make our money back, as a country, a million times by actually looking after people and getting them well in this vessel. But it obviously seems that they've intentionally not shown us how to care for this vessel that we live in and exist in.
100%, 100%. The true nature of us, of ourselves, whether that be spiritually or whether that be our bodies, is kept from us for so many reasons. One, I think to disconnect from that spiritual and consciousness higher up, which keeps people feeling small and insignificant. Also keeps
Mm,
people looking for 5 cents answers to much bigger problems. And equally, if we don't understand our bodies, you getting sick and unwell and having physical issues is just going to be an inevitability, because you're going to do the wrong thing, and you might do the what you consider to be the right thing. You go onto health websites in pretty much every country, and you see that eat well plate, and it tells you to do this. Well, if you do that, you're destined to get ill. Pure and simple.
mm,
It's one of those things. I always think and describe mainstream medicine as very good at treating acute problems. If you have a car accident, you need your leg putting back together, you're going to go into the hospital. But if you have any kind of chronic condition, they've not got a clue. They have no idea how to treat it.
They don't
And
even
and
try. They don't even
no,
pretend that they're going to try.
no,
It's like steroids and bleach baths for your eczema. That's all we've got. And you actually feel sorry for them, really. Any woman who wants help with her menstrual cycle and they say, well, really, we've got the pill or the marina, and they only know how to wipe out your hormones altogether. They truly don't know
yeah.
anything else.
I think what you said there was really interesting as well about the money side of it, because in terms of the amount of money that gets, so take America, because America is obviously the worst. Pretty much I think it's nearly about 60% of people over 30 now have one or more chronic conditions. I think it's around 35% of children under 18 as well. Sickest country in the world. Also have the worst food in the world and the worst medical treatment in the world. But if you look at the money that gets spent on either people who are unable to work because of various different physical or psychological conditions, whether it be the money that is spent through the medical institutions, pharmaceutical companies, and so on, all of that could be saved by, like you say there, having that regular check where people are kept healthy, and people are therefore going to be in work, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be better people, they're going to give more to their families, they're going to be more vibrant, happy people, they're going to be doing more with their lives. So you'd earn that back tenfold. So
Mm,
the money side of it, when people just say, oh, they're keeping us sick for the money, it's all the pharmaceutical companies making all this profit and all of that, that argument doesn't sit with me, because they'd make more probably by having a really fit, healthy, strong army of workforce. So there has to be
mm.
something more to the reason they're making us sick, which we can go deep down the rabbit hole if you want on that one. But I think people that are stronger are much more likely to push back against things they don't like. People that
And
are barely struggling to survive are going to give in.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so bang on the money. And when it comes to homeopathy, right, we look at the history of it and just how suppressed it's been. So, like you said, over 100 years ago, there were over 100 homeopathic hospitals. So it was huge. And a lot of medical doctors were finding once they started using homeopathy, they way preferred it for the results that they were getting compared to back then. And so, they bring out these even sort of the AMA, so the American Medical Association, they bring in this sort of rule as part of their association, is that you cannot fraternize with a homeopath and you cannot consult with a homeopath on a case. So any conversation was grounds for it. And there were multiple people there losing their medical license for, affiliating with homeopaths. But that's the level of fear that they have of people, I think, realizing that there is a true way to heal people. And when people come in to see a homeopath, even though we do dwell with a lot of the physical ailments, and that's usually what drives people to us is, the skin conditions that they've got going on, or, a physical ache pain, they've got arthritis and they desperately need help. But what a lot of them come with and what we resolve for them that they're not expecting is, things like their addictions, and their depressive behavior, or the sorts of things that they've done to cope with their anxiety. And so when you go into a hospital these days, we've got diabetic wards in our hospitals where people are just getting limbs amputated. And a lot of
Yeah.
these people, they were told, look, if you don't stop eating, these sorts of things, and you don't start moving, this is what's going to happen. You're going to lose your leg. But what I find sad and disappointing, that our government has kept things so suppressed, is that a lot of the things that drive people to eat poorly or to not move or to be down and out, like they're in a vibrational funk. And they probably grew up, in a house where they learned all sorts of like negative things. And this real energetic kind of loop can be really strong. And then you've got them, let's say, comfort eating for all of the grief and everything that they've suppressed. And so, our hospital then makes people feel bad for being, addicted to things or not able to like muscle through it. But like I've worked with so many adults, like men, right? Strong men, mentally strong men, but they are fully caught up in their addictions and they can't break them. They feel totally powerless to overcome their addictions, or sometimes even it's their personality traits, right? They just say, but I'm just a hothead, or I just have like really severe OCD. And yes, I'm really controlling, and that's just me. And it's not until they take their homeopathic remedies and it seems to completely transform. Their wives are like, what on earth? Like, why is he acting so different? And it's that so much of that, say traumatized energy or whatever it is that we have absorbed throughout our lives, once that's transmuted out. And I think that's really what homeopathy is, and what the original doctors, like they were real whizzes. Even Paracelsus, you probably know Paracelsus, but some of the
Yeah.
famous things he said make it seem like he fully understood homeopathy and they understood alchemy. And that's where, the founder of homeopathy, he was living in this, well, not living in there, but he was working in this library a lot. So he was translating all these medical texts of people like Paracelsus. Isaac Newton did heaps of work in alchemy, but people only really know him for his work in gravity. But their minds, they understood transmuting energy. And so, with that alchemizing, it is of the physical body, but also the mental and emotional. It's really that renewing, like a new person when their energy is completely changed. And then you start to attract all these epic synchronicities because you are aligned. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
when the government shuts down and hides homeopathy, you would know it's like it would be pretty disastrous for them to have a whole lot of aligned people who are healed and they know their worth and they know what they want for their families, and they're strong enough to get it done and not get distracted, by sort of our negative loops. You know what I mean?
100%. There's people like that would be much, much more difficult to control.
Mm,
I think what's really interesting is homeopathy and most forms of medicine or any alternative mainstream are things that people do when there's a problem or when they consider to be a major problem. But what you've just described there is more of a preventative area, which I think is really, really fascinating. I've not read too much about that when it comes to homeopathy in terms of particularly the mental, emotional, psychological impacts that homeopathy can have on people. That, like you listed, some character traits there, whether people are anxious, people have
mm,
OCD. Um, I wasn't aware that it could really help with that, because that's something, especially in 2026. I'm sure you see it as well. Anxiety and so on. People are really struggling out there, whether it's issues that they can't explain or whether it's issues that they can explain, like struggling to stay afloat financially or worried about the
mm.
uncertainty of the world and so on. And now is a time when people could really use some of these tools.
And I think it's all about breaking those vibrational chains. And so, say this is what a homeopathic materia medica looks like, right? So it's a huge book. And so these, when you read through them and you see the different types of anxiety and the physical things that manifest with it, the OCD, it's sort of like finding the core delusion, that each remedy, so each frequency. So when it comes to homeopathy, we harness the frequencies from nature, from all sorts of places, whether it's from an animal source, mineral source, a lot of plants, obviously a lot of herbs we make into remedies because they uniquely vibrate. So your arnica that people use for your postpartum healing or an injury or the delayed onset muscle soreness if you've like busted your ass at the gym, and it really helps. So a lot of the European soccer teams, they give their players homeopathic arnica daily because they know that it repairs the tissues quicker. So you've got that layer of it. But say, for example, if we were to look at a homeopathic profile to like make it more real, we've got this remedy, let's say lycopodium. And I've been seeing a lot of cases with lycopodium lately, so I've just got like a total soft spot for it. But in the lycopodium picture, there can be, say, for a lot of people, a lack of like male energy. So if you grew up without a dad, and like how many people these days do, and so it's like that
Yeah.
safety in the house where, like, as your spirit, if you're a kid growing up in a house where there's not like a father, it can be a different energy. And so, what we see if somebody does go down that lycopodium route, you'll read in this textbook about how they have all of these fears of failure, and they might have um, a lot of issues with commitment, and makes sense, right? Like they had a father who's like gone. A lot of these people, as they're growing up, they can have real commitment issues in relationships. They might be really promiscuous, or say people who just want to play around, like, but they're nervous and they're scared to actually commit and like, settle down. But then you read through all their physical symptoms, and a lot of them have issues with things like reflux, gut
Yeah.
issues, bloating, all of those sort of physicals. They can get skin issues. It's a big liverish remedy. And so people come into us and they really just want help with those, physical things. And they are absolutely shocked when they take the remedy and they start to like purge all this grief about like the dad wasn't around, and then how sort of controlling they've had to be. And it can completely change that personality. And those people usually have certain cravings. Some of our remedies, they really crave alcohol and they crave drugs. And it's like such a full on thing. And so you can look at the negative aspects of every remedy, but then there's the beauty also of the positive attributes of these people who have those energetic distortions. And so there are some pictures and some energies that come down family lines, and they can be mad creative, mad intuitive, tapped into that right brain. They'll be more prone to being like left-handed, more prone to dyslexia, more prone to rheumatism, or whatever like things you look through in that textbook. But that is the nature of energy. So you can do generational trauma and cleanse that out. But definitely, yeah, your OCDs, your behavioral issues in kids. A lot of parents come to us, they're like, my kid is so bent out of shape. My kid is either so angry or so anxious. And that is all just energy that can be moved. So when people realize, a lot of people, they know the homeopathic first aid kits, or maybe they've heard about something like homeoprophylaxis, which is using homeopathy to prevent infectious diseases. There's so many different areas of homeopathy, but I think my favorite part is really that whole personality transformation. And then you look in people's lives, and people will say to me, like, say the guy that you give that lycopodium to, he's had all these fears, right? I'm not really good enough. I'm scared, I'm fear of failure is huge. And then they've taken that remedy and that vibration is gone. And the procrastinating just falls out the window. And all of a sudden, they've created the thing that they were always capable of, but it was that energy that held them back in that bit of a holding pattern. So I think what the world needs now, like really more than anything, yes, we need good health. But I do think we really need alignment so that people can really get their life in order and create what they were brought here to do. And like the founder of homeopathy, he sort of famously said, like in his definition of health, like health is not just the absence of disease. Like, if you go to a medical doctor, they might say, what, your bloods are great, whatever, you're perfect, go, it's fine. But it's like health is not the absence of disease. Health is living your life in a way that fulfills your purpose, like your God-given purpose of why you're here. And if you've even got these mental and emotional patterns holding you back, right, or you've got addictions or whatever, you're not really in a state of health because you're not fulfilling what you came
Yeah.
for. So.
100%. I completely agree. And it's very, very easy to see why we're so out of balance, because what you get, you're born, you have what, 5 years, depending what country you're in, you have 5 years where you're sort of learning the basics, and then you're stuck in front of a teacher for the next, what, 10, 12, and then you go into a job, probably a job you don't want to do, where you're there for the next, what, 50 years. You're living for the weekend for most people, or a holiday once a year, and then you have a few years at the end when you're too old probably to do so many of the things you would love to have done in your 20s, or you haven't got the money to do the things you want to do, or even if you've got the money, you can't physically do the things you'd have wanted to do. It's so easy to see why we're so out of balance. We spend so much of our lives sat inside under artificial light. We don't spend anything like as much time in nature as we once did. And people that live and work in these big high rises in the middle of cities that never see anything natural. It's quite
Mm.
clear to see why there clearly is a misalignment, because we don't live
Yeah.
in a natural way at all. Like, you think about,
Mm.
obviously, down where you are in Australia, you think about how people live there now to how the indigenous would have lived a century ago.
I know.
It would have been
So,
literally polar opposite. Same in
and they were
America with
so tapped in. Yeah, the Aboriginal people, they would have understood vibration. And so even with their didgeridoos or even with their circles where they would sit and talk, it's like that's all vibration, that's all energy moving. And now, yeah, you're right. We live in this just most artificial, crazy world where we are really removed from nature's frequencies. Hey, so it's like our ability to recalibrate. So, like homeopathic remedies is one way, of course, but grounding and being super close to nature, so many people would heal just by those healing frequencies alone.
Yeah,
But
100%, 100%. And I think there's people are ready for this now like never before, because
mm,
people have had enough. They've had
mm,
enough where they feel like they're giving more but getting less. Whether that's because the cost of everything has gone up, whether that's because things just seem more difficult, whether that's because taxes are going up, whether that's because health is declining in most people. People want
mm,
something. They want an answer. And I think the area you've just spoken about, the kind of personality transformations, I think that could, sounds very, very bold, but I think that literally could change the world, because I think
mm,
people's relationship with themselves and that person that looks back at them in the mirror is the fundamental starting point to changing the world. Because, we talk about trying to change the world as this big grand thing, and it seems so massive and so out of reach, and you do feel like you're kind of, chucking water into the wind and it's not going to go anywhere. But collectively, if enough individuals actually reassess that relationship with themselves and go, you know what, I'm not just here to work, pay bills and die. I'm not just here by accident. I'm here to do something, whatever that might mean to an individual. Some people will be happy and content staying at home and being a full-time parent, and absolutely amazing. Some people feel they need to, earn six figures and have a big high-flying career. Contentment is different for each person. But
mm,
so many people, I think, if we just sat and reassessed our relationship with ourselves,
mm,
that would collectively change everything. If the four of
mm,
you in a household decided to reassess that, you've changed the house. If the neighbors do the same, you've changed the streets change, and it evolves like that. I think we've always
mm,
always been looking outside of ourselves, haven't we? That somebody else is going
mm,
to do it, somebody else is going to make the change, or someone's going to give me all the answers, or give me a handout for whatever it is that I want to achieve. When the person you look at in the mirror each morning, that's always been the answer.
mm,
And I think
mhm,
collectively that could make such a huge impact, such a huge impact. So to go down that track, what's your ambitions for the future with
mm,
this? With
mm.
what you've just spoken about there, and where you think this can go, and how big and influential you think it can be on the world.
Mm. So I think when people realize what homeopathy actually is, like what it can offer. So you talking even like detoxing, right? If somebody's had a vaccine that's gone wrong and we have people come into us and we give them the homeopathic that corresponds to that, to see people who were truly crippled, have a huge healing response. Sometimes even if that medical intervention wasn't, it was like 10, 20 years ago, to see the healing that comes after when you're flooding their body with the very specific frequency that matches the distortion of the assault that happened back then, it's huge. And so you've got a lot of people in the world, even in that area, looking for healing. And when they find it in homeopathy, people never go back. So you've got all your acutes that you would use homeopathy for, using your kits at home that a lot of people have. Then you want to deal with all of that chronic disease that, our medical system is not currently set up to serve. They are good, like you said, a car accident, emergency surgeries, very late stage intervention. But really, 80% of what's clogging up our medical centers or our hospitals, it's all this chronic disease which is being mismanaged terribly. And actually, a lot of the toxic band aids that they're slapping on. It makes our work in actually healing people a longer journey. Now we got to detox and undo a lot of the suppression that you did. And so, it just makes it longer. So it's unnecessary. So once people find that homeopathy covers pretty much everything short of that little area where pharmaceutical medicine shines, and that allopathic system, that's when, I think we need as many homeopaths, if not more, than we have of medical doctors. And people would use that as the first line of defense. And so you would have your kids raised that way. You would have your mums birthing that way with the birth kits. And as for, does it really make a difference when you're raising your kids this way? If you were to survey, all the homeopaths, and you check in like with our kids, how many of your kids, have needed an antibiotic? Or you ask any of the parents who've raised their children with homeopathy, and if you were to look, how many have needed a round of antibiotics? How many have needed a steroid? How many have needed any medical intervention? You see very, straight up that homeopathy, it looks after itself. Like these people are thriving. So yeah, that getting people on that track and very much community based. So when you go back, Rockefeller really considered to be the man who
Yep.
got pharmaceutical medicine going, but he had three private homeopaths for his own family. Like he completely knew what energetic alignment looked like, and probably what getting rid of like generational, energy that would have thrown him off kilter. So, they use that. And these homeopathic hospitals, when you look at the stats, even 100 years ago, it was very obvious how powerful they were, in terms of the mortality rates were so very low compared to the allopathic counterparts. So it doesn't even compare. So Weston A. Price wrote an article on it, The History of Homeopathy in Epidemics. And it is just so powerful to see those actual stats, and so it really stands for what homeopathy can achieve if we were to bring that back in as our first line of defense, that medicine. And so what we're doing is training up all of these homeopaths, because we're so sought after at the moment, to be honest, that like wait lists are like 6 months long. And I know when I was working in fertility and it was busting out like 6 months, 9 month wait list, we just need more people now to serve the community, and what's needed. And so we're opening our first homeopathic, we have to call it a healing center. I'm not allowed to call it a hospital, like on the building itself. But we open our first in Australia, in a couple of months. And so, even having those hours in the day where we provide free treatment to the community. So all the kids, coming before school, after school, whatever things they're going through. That's how the old homeopathic hospitals often functioned. Or Samuel Hahnemann himself, he would have people come in, treat them for free, even though he'd be working with a lot of the rich and famous, people. He retired in Paris, so he saw a lot of upper class people. But yeah, remembering what it's about, that it's about actually raising up our communities. We are really only as strong as each other. And we heal ourselves first, definitely, because that makes us our most powerful creator. That means that
Yep.
everyone who comes into contact with us, it's that on-flowing of aligned energy. And like that can't be, understated how important it is to like go within. But then I think anyone who has that level of aligned energy, they naturally want to do good for others. They naturally want to help other people, and sort of be that shining light. And so I think in terms of revolution around the world, like I look around the world and I do, like during COVID, the first time I was still, stay-at-home mum with my three boys. But I said to my husband, who worked, building high rises, I said, I really think that the world needs homeopathy right now. Like desperately, they are looking for this as a solution, and it's been hidden. And so many people don't realize what it means if this was mainstream, if we got, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people using homeopaths as that first line of defense. To me, that is the method through which I plan to try and help funnel as much money away from the pharmaceutical industry or these very corrupt, education facilities that are just really indoctrinating. And we start to funnel that into the hands of people and communities where we actually start to build these good, productive systems that make humanity happy and healthy. We don't need as much material things as we thought we did if we had communities who were aligned, and like we wanted to work together and cooperate and sort of have a fun time, I think, with what we're doing. And with medicine and healing, it doesn't have to be this heavy, dire, the world's going to end kind of vibe. You know, I'm pretty hopeful that we're really going to turn this around, and I'm watching it sort of like this tidal wave coming through. And people only have to see homeopathy work. They see it that once, or like with a close friend of theirs, and then it's like we'll be set, I think. So I'm pretty optimistic.
I love that. I love that inspiration, and I think what you said there is very, very poignant. Which is, rather than, because people have this perception we have to fight the system, whereas I
Mm,
think just make it irrelevant, just make it obsolete. So what you said
totally.
there, by creating an alternative that people can just go there, they don't even need to go there. They just ignore it. That just doesn't happen. You walk into doctor surgeries and hospitals, and they're just empty. No one uses them. You don't
Mm,
need to fight them. You just need to ignore them. It's like, on a simpler level, you take these big corporations that are selling you rubbish food. Well, if nobody bought it, they'd go out of
mm,
business. If nobody
mm,
went to McDonald's, they'd go bankrupt within a couple of weeks if everyone stopped going there, probably. Same with
mm,
Coca-Cola and all these big corporations. So I think that attitude of, right, let's just start something alternative then, and let's make that the thing that people want. And like you said, people only have to see it work. It's not, that your marketing, in a sense, is just doing what you're doing, because as soon as people have seen the
yeah.
results, they're sold. They don't need to be sold. They
Yeah,
just need to see it work, really.
totally.
Which is
And
it's incredible.
I'm finding that in our academy because our students, they do 30 cases, right? Where they're working with individuals, taking the case, receiving, okay, what have you got? You've got asthma that we need to resolve. They're prescribing a remedy. They have the people come back. And so they're tracking those cases. And out of all of the people, so we had 570 people sign up to study homeopathy in this last round, which is really huge numbers for homeopathy. That's like, whoa, like the world is moving now. People are getting on, and the amount of people that they've treated who are now signing up to study because they are like shook by like how their life has transformed. Then they've got like their kids and their husbands in, and they're like, oh my gosh, and it becomes obsessive when you realize like the power of vibration. And I love, like, I'm very on the alternative sphere for, all the people who are into that real spirit, meet science kind of medicine. And so whether it's like Dispenza, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, like they're all cutting edge of like that thought. But what I love about homeopathy is like when you take those vibrations, like the frequency in the bottle, it turfs out a lot of the old, stagnant, unnecessary, toxic stuff without the person necessarily having to meditate for 2 years to be able to sort of like access that area. It really like purges it out for them. So it's that alchemy, that process, and that transmutation of energy. It's so much quicker. And when you're working with kids, say for example, and like let's say a baby that's got really bad colic, right? And they've got really bad pains, and they're pulling their leg up, and mum and dad are at their wits' end, like, oh my gosh, my kid's in pain. What can I do? Um, but then to have the homeopathy come in there, it's like the baby doesn't need to understand the reason why the remedy's working. They don't even need to know what they're taking. The parents just put the drops in the tongue. That frequency, almost like a fractal of the whole body, because you have to wonder, how can you take drops like directly under the tongue, and then within 20 seconds you see that baby stop crying and fully relax and put their legs down, like they're not screaming in colicky pain. And it's like the energy when we heal a body, you take a dose in the mouth and it reflects through this sort of whole, sort of like holographic body. But then you do think, for us as humans, with that whole as above, so below, inward, outward, that when we do heal ourselves, we also do project that out into the world and what we're creating. So, anyway, with this whole sort of new, exciting world that we're creating, and like you said, making the old systems redundant, um, yeah, just like that alignment and the synchronicities and the world opening up for us, I think is very possible the more people who start hooking themselves into homeopathy, or also prayer. Prayer is obviously vibration, intention, like praying over yourself, your family, and everything. Like that's hugely like vibrationally impactful as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think like religion's almost stolen prayer when it doesn't need to have a religious context to it at all. It can be a spiritual context, of an intention, like you say. I think that's something that
Absolutely.
people are always associated with having to be a Christian or something like that. When it's just essentially it's a concentrated thought, isn't it? which can
And it's so
you can apply to
scientifically backed now. Like they're showing, like when you think about something, reality changes. So it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're just fully banking in on that sort of leading edge science that spiritually, people would have known for thousands of years.
Absolutely. We just had it suppressed, and now it's starting to come back. So for people that are listening to this that want to either study, I'm sure there'll be lots of people listening that are inspired by this and want to learn more. And for people that want to read more and find out how to get involved in homeopathy or book an appointment, if there's any issues that they
Mm.
want to look at, how would they get in touch with you?
So I do the most sort of online free teaching on Instagram where we talk about all different remedies and what healing actually looks like. Like when you take a remedy, what can you actually expect that to look like after? Because healing isn't all butterflies and rainbows. Like that purging can be huge. I know my husband, his family has a history of rheumatism. And recently he started taking this remedy, and it's a mixture of thulium and rhinum. And he usually makes me massage his legs like every night because they're sort of sore and he gets a bit like restless legs. And then I'd put him on this remedy to sort of clear out some of his ancestral stuff. And his legs, his knees, his calves, his ankles, in all the areas that he would normally make me massage, they blew up big and red and they got really sore, really inflamed. Then, when it all went down, all of that sort of rheumatism kind of pain completely disapparated. So I am completely off massage duty, ongoing now. But the point is that when people take a remedy, these healing responses can be kind of frightening. So you guys do want to know what healing looks like. So that education is on Instagram at that homeopath, but we teach through Remedy Academy. We're the largest homeopathic cohort, I think, in history. So we're very excited with how huge it's going. Gorgeous community, some of the greatest people you'll ever meet on this journey, learning about, remedies, about the body. So it's a 2-year course if anybody wants to study and be a homeopath. We're just encouraging anyone who feels obsessed with healing, of helping people transform their lives. Yeah, you would love it. Just look into it. And we've actually got a free course. I'll send you the link, Jaymie, but it's like 6 modules and we go through sort of like vaccine detox, homeoprophylaxis. So if you wanted to prevent against pertussin or whooping cough, what does that look like homeopathically? And then we cover like children's remedies, first aid remedies, but also some of the adult male and female ones, right? So what does a lachesis woman act like, and what are her hormones like, and what's her physical health like, and what's a nux vom man like, and why is he so impatient and got such a bad temper, blah, blah, blah. So I'll give you the link to that, Jaymie, if anyone wants to just learn more about how to use homeopathy in their home. It's really helpful, like beginner level, to find out if homeopathy is just really up your alley.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll share all those with the audience as well. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Thank you so much, Jaymie. Appreciate you.